First of all, I'm Doug Ogle. I'm the Executive Director of Personnel and in charge of Secondary Ed. Basically what we're going to do tonight is kind of do a quick overview of the drug policy with the power slide. Then we'll go into some Q&A. We have a representative from the drug testing company that's here. We have some board members that are here, and Dr. Simpson, and some administrators, and then our athletic director. And so hopefully this will educate you a little bit on what we're doing. And so if you have some questions, like I said, the PowerPoint will probably answer most of those, but at the end we'll open it up for Q&A. So basically, what is the purpose of the policy? The policy is to educate students of the serious physical, mental, and emotional harm caused by illegal and performance-enhancing drug use, to alert students with possible substance abuse problems to the potential harms that drugs pose for their well-being, ensure that students adhere to training programs that bars the intake of illegal and performance-enhancing drugs, to prevent injury, illness, and harm for students that may arise as a result of illegal and performance-enhancing drugs, to offer student practices, competition, and school activities free of the effects and performance-enhancing drug use. And probably the main one that we're trying to do is to be a deterrent for our students. Is if the students have a reason not to participate, if they're at a party, I think the study shows that they have a reason to say no, and that's our whole thing. Is we're not trying to be a gotcha. We're trying to go out and say, hey, here's a reason not to, because we want you to perform in our extracurricular. And so hopefully that they're just going to say no, and if they're put in that situation. Our timeline of implementation. Dr. Simpson did the press release August 24th. Talked about the purpose of what the policy was and why we were doing it. August 25th, it was kind of the 24th, 25th, the coaches all met, junior high coaches and some of the high school coaches with the athletic director, John Chappell. They went over exactly what was going to happen, so they were able to explain the process to the coaches. They met with the students starting around the 28th. They're still working with the different extracurricular activities and handing those out to those sponsors and coaches so we can start collecting those policies back. Community meetings tonight, and then testing about the third week in September. And so we're collecting all the names right now, and they'll put those, and we'll go through a slideshow and kind of tell you how that those names are popped out. But that's the timeline, the implementation. The intervention team, building administration, director of athletics, school nurse, and then we have 2 outside counselors that will be providing the service for those students that test positive. And those are family and children's consultants and Logan County Youth and Family Services. They have licensed counselors that deal with drug and alcohol abuse. And so they will be able to counsel those students that we need to get counseling to according to the policy. How are the students selected for testing? All students in junior high and high school participating in extracurricular activities that compete in a sanctioned event. Some of you asked, why do we not test everybody in the whole school? Well, that would be nice to do, but everybody's at least entitled to a free education. Extracurricular is a bonus. And so basically what has happened is schools across the state have adopted the same policy that's been taken all the way to the Supreme Court, which basically said, the Supreme Court says extracurricular activity students can be tested. And so that's why that extracurricular activities are tested. Mr. Chappell and Mr. Dayton will put together a spreadsheet with the students' names and an email to a testing vendor by the school site. From there, the testing vendor will generate a random list each month and will bring to each school on the day of the test. One thing I want to clarify that is we're not going to know ahead of time. We met with Select Force, the testing company. We may know the day that they're going to come. We're not going to know the names of the students until they show up that day. And they'll hand us a piece of paper and say, these were randomly picked. Here's the students. I know that was one of the things that was out there was, well, they're just going to tell the kids that are going to come. No, we're not even going to know those kids that are coming. The testing company will bring those in. And approximately 30 students will be chosen randomly monthly by our testing company. Randomly, we're looking at around 20 students at the high school level and 10 at the junior high. The collection method, all policies must be read, signed, and turned in to coach or sponsor by Friday, September 11th, so we're still got a couple weeks to get those in. Select Force is the testing vendor that was chosen. It's a 12-panel urine drug test. I'm not going to go through all those. Basically, those are the 12 that are the most popular that students are using, and so we could have went with the 5-panel, but we wanted to be able to catch some of those other things that are out there. cost of the testing. Guthrie Public Schools will fund the cost of the drug testing. Students who test positive will be responsible for the cost of the 2-week follow-up drug testing as required by policy. When I was visiting with Tammy with Select Force, one thing that the policy does state, if you're caught, that you have to retest every 2 weeks. Marijuana will not be out of the system in 2 weeks, and so they will test that month after that. And I think Tammy will address this here in a little bit. But everything else will test in 2 weeks if you get caught the first time, and it will either be gone or out of your system by then. But marijuana takes at least up to 4 weeks, and Tammy will go over that in a minute. And so, and then required counseling will be at no cost to the students. What happens if a test is positive? Okay, the first thing, additional positive test will require a second test of the same specimen. If the second test of that is confirmed positive, the building principal and director of athletics will be notified. So Tammy's company, Select Force, they take the first one. It will show right away here if it's positive or negative. If it's positive, they'll take that back. They'll do further tests at their company. From there, they will get back with you, and it'll come back to the athletic director or site administrators. And then the building principal or director of athletics will notify the parent or guardian or head coach and instructor, and they'll set up a meeting. The first offense, the parent or guardian is contacted immediately. The meeting is set up with the student, parent, guardian, athletic director, and site administration. The student must complete 3 hours of counseling before they can participate in extracurricular activity again, and the student is retested in 2 weeks. Remember, I just talked about the marijuana that would be at least 4 weeks before we would do that. The other ones would be tested again. Second offense, suspended from extracurricular events for 14 calendar days, must complete 6 hours of substance abuse, education, counseling, and student is retested monthly for the remainder of the school year. The third offense in the same school year, complete suspension from participation in all extracurricular activities for the remainder of the school year, or 88 school days, 1 semester, whichever is longer. I think that was some question, is it carry over? No, it starts over every school year. What if you refuse to take the drug test? The student is not eligible to participate in any extracurricular activity, and the students will not be considered for any extracurricular activity, honors, or awards given by the school. Some of the things, everybody thinks that there's just small schools that are drug testing because of smaller amount of students. One of the things we did was emailed a lot of the schools. As you can see, those are a lot of the schools that we're competing against, 5A, 6A schools, and a couple of 4As. And so a lot of our school in our conference, they're all drug testing. Now what I'll do is I'll open it up. I'll have Tammy come up here from Select Force. Athletic Director John Chappell. Ryan Dayton does the junior high athletics. And so if there's questions that you guys want to know about it, I think Tammy's probably going to be the one that's going to answer the most, because it's a lot, usually it's about the actual test itself, but we'll answer the best of them. And Dr. Simpson is back here, and we have board members if you need to ask them any questions. So, questions?
The common question I do get a lot is, what if my child is on a prescription? And that's probably the most common thing that I hear. And if there is a prescription, when we get an initial result that tells us something needs to go out for further testing, it's pending confirmation, we would send that out, get it reconfirmed by another lab, and then a medical review officer would we'd get the parent's contact information, and they would contact the parent and make sure what prescriptions that child is on to make sure if it fits with what showed up on the test. So the initial test is never considered a positive until it is confirmed by GCMS testing and a medical review officer is involved. So we call them pending confirmation when we get an initial screen. So they're never considered positive until that second test is actually confirmed and we've actually gone through the review process with the medical review officer.
What about non-prescription? Because like my kids take antihistamines and so forth.
Right.
During
same thing
that time of year.
That's a good question, because what happens is that a medical review officer will ask you anything that you've ingested, because there are also foods that sometimes can metabolize, like poppy seeds. You'd have to eat a lot of them to actually take you over the cutoff level in a drug test for opiates. But that is common. That they would ask you. There's certain over-the-counter medicine an antihistamine, because that would show up possibly as amphetamine based. So those are the reasons we call them pending confirmation, because that's the interview process that we go through after the test is taken, and we do that second level of testing, because there's things that could flag on an instant test that would be confirmed by GCMS testing, which is the top of the line testing, and then a medical review officer would do that interview process to say, hey, what did you take? And so and we don't ask people what they're on when we do the testing. That's another common thing that I get asked, because that's private. We don't, there's, due to the HIPAA laws and the Privacy Acts, we don't want to know if somebody's just taking prescriptions. It's not our place to ask that question. What typically happens is that's when if something flags, then a medical review officer will ask that. So we don't ask for the kids to actually tell us, oh, I took this or whatever. So that's another reason for privacy and security. We don't ask those questions. So the process, the most thing that I also see a lot of, and we do a lot of tests. I mean, thousands of tests, and it's the embarrassment. Kids don't like to show their pee to other kids. I don't know why. We all do it. We all pee. It's not a hazardous waste even, but it's we do our best to say there's nothing there. Don't be embarrassed about this. It's a common practice when you get out in the workforce. If you're over 18, you may be tested now. I mean, if you work for Dollar General or Walmart, they tested our facility. So it's very common for kids to have to go through this. And, it's just, we try not to make them any more embarrassed than they have to be. There will only be a few students down at a time. We try to make it as quick as possible, because we want them to get back into class. They're at school to learn, not really to just, to be interrupted by this process. So we try to make it as very quick and painless as possible. Shy bladder is an issue sometimes. People just can't go to the bathroom on demand. I don't know why. I go to the bathroom like 3,000 times a day, but some people just can't. So we let them step aside, drink some water, and within a certain time frame, if it goes in, it's got to come out. So it actually does happen. Normally, most people aren't penalized because they can't go to the bathroom, but usually we just let them relax a little bit. Usually it's just that tension of, I don't know, I have a lot of coaches at some of my other schools. They'll just start making them do a few jumping jacks, and then in a few minutes they've got to go to the bathroom, because exercise makes you go. So any questions that I didn't answer?
I got a couple.
Okay.
Gender specific, right? Gender sensitive. I mean, the male testers, girl testers.
No, we don't go in the bathroom with the person.
They don't?
No. So it's not an observed test, so it'll probably be a female collector. I mean, I have male collectors, but usually for the schools.
That was the question that came to mind.
Yeah, but they're not observed.
Attention.
So they're going to go in the bathroom, but they'll be in the bathroom by themselves. Now, if they're ever in a bathroom where there's somebody there, it would be a monitor, and that would be a male monitor, and possibly, and with the 20, we probably won't need that. But if that were the case, then we would have a coach or somebody standing in the bathroom, and it would be a male with male and female with female.
And the other question is, you don't share information on positives or negatives with anybody, correct? Except the school.
That's correct. Well, and actually not just the school. It's actually just with the designated representative at the school that we've been identified. And that's part of our process of setting up an account, is we have certain individuals that are identified as authorized to get this information, and they would be probably the athletic director and the building administrator.
So that information's not going to be public. It's not going to be in the paper. Nobody's going to have it.
No.
These are just concerns that have been brought to my attention. So
absolutely, those are good questions, and they're very common. I mean, that's really, this whole process, I mean, drug testing in itself, it is a deterrent. It's not meant to make someone feel as they've been caught. It's really to try to give somebody that awareness that, drugs are not good, and give an opportunity for parents to have that conversation that they may need to have if something does come up. It's even if someone does make that mistake and make a bad choice, that actually opens that door for that conversation to figure out this is a good time to do that. Instead of the hindsight, I do a lot of speaking with parents, helping parents, which is usually too late. I mean, these kids are far gone, and they're down a path that they're so far down that it's really difficult to come back to. At this opportunity, you get a chance to start that conversation and stop that process.
One of the things that we didn't discuss is where the actual testing will take place. The high school will be in the north office. There's a male and female restroom in there, and then at the junior high we'll be in the gymnasium and use the 2 restrooms right there. You want to talk about what you do to stage the?
Absolutely. That's one of the things I was going to say is we prep the bathrooms. A lot of times they'll ask me, why do you put blue in the toilet? And it could be purple. It's blue or purple. We put a color in the toilet because you can't have access to clear water when you're doing a drug test, because it could be easily dipped into the cup, and every cup has a temperature strip. We're going to always be checking for temperature just to make sure that it was actually a real void from that person at that time, because we're not watching them. That's how we can determine if they gave us their cup, is it's got a temperature strip on it. The clear water, that we actually tape off all water. They can't wash their hands. That's probably the thing that, oh, I don't want to wash my hands. I need to wash my hands. And we have hand sanitizer right at the table, so they can actually wash their hands at the table, but they just can't be turning on water in the bathrooms. So everything's removed out of the bathroom. There's going to be no, if there's any kind of sprays or anything in there, we always remove all that, set outside the door. So it's just, it's a pretty painless process. You just go in, you go to the bathroom. They're a big cup, it's not a little bitty cup, so the girls are, usually happy about that because it's not a little bitty vial. They have the most difficult to have to actually catch their specimen. So it's a pretty painless process, but we do tape everything off, and that's one of the questions I get a lot is, why is there blue in there? And it's because you can't have clear water.
What's the price per test?
It's about $17 unless it has to be confirmed, and then the confirmation is $35 for that.
I noticed, Doug, maybe this is more something on policy. I didn't notice this the first time I read through it, but if it's after the second, then they're required to take a test monthly?
Yes.
Is that at the expense of that family or of the school?
No, the school will pick it up monthly. The only time that they're going to be is after that first initial.
Positive. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I got another.
Is there going to be a representative at the school where you can go to and say, is this okay? I mean, you're going to take, and I ran into this because being concerned about pregnancy week, going to get calotated, heavy vitamin, get everything, balanced right. And I noticed there's a sports vitamin and it had in the list of 35 vitamins or whatever, there's a creatine per person. And I don't know if that's performance enhancing or not.
It's not.
I don't know what that means.
I think you can actually take small amounts of creatine. Now, the NCAA.
Well, this says it's a per person. I think it's like you're getting ready to take it.
Right.
But is there somebody you can take it to and say, hey, is this okay before I take it?
John and Ryan can handle that, and they both got penicillin.
Right. They can get in touch with me if they have a question on something. We can always look at, if it's something we're not familiar with, we'll look that up and we'll get in touch with our MR, our medical review officer, and confirm.
And if it did hit positive, the phone call that the gentleman that would call you could explain that all to them.
That would be the next thing. If I took something, but it was an over-the-counter, I got it at GNC, and it's something that's it's a post-workout supplement or whatever, then they would look at that and say, okay. And most of the things that are on this test, the list of things that are on there, you're not going to see. They're not those are not narcotic based, so they wouldn't normally flag a narcotic. I mean, it's even like steroids, for example. Steroids are anabolic, and anabolic steroids are not part of this testing. So even if someone was using an anabolic steroid, that would not show up on this test. The one thing that you did see on this test, and that's pretty common, is what they call K2 or spice, which is really common out there right now, and that is a synthetic, made up drug that's like synthetic pot. It does not have the same impact on a person at all that marijuana has. Marijuana is a natural herb, grown, and in some states even legal. But K2 or spice is something that's been compounded by different chemicals. And what it does to people is far, far more dangerous than actually marijuana or THC does.
How do you test for K2 when they're constantly changing the formula and the state can't even test for prosecution?
It's difficult, and that's the thing. We get the latest compound that's tested for. Now, could it change? And that's what it's constant chase on that. But it has been tested for. We do have positive tests that are K2, and but it just depends on how old.
How old is that data? I mean, does your lab update that frequently?
They update it frequently, and we don't buy quantities of instant tests super far in advance because we want the latest version of the testing. Lovely fly wants to chase me around it. But no, that's a very good question, because it is a chemical makeup, and so what happens is they just constantly change that compound and that formula to make a new version of it, and that's what's so scary. And what's really bad is that people used to buy that at a convenience store, and it was sold as bath salts or potpourri, and kids started using that, and people started using that. And I would just say kids, because there's been incidents. We had an incident. One of the schools that we test for is Midvale schools, and they had a bus driver that obviously was utilizing that. You saw the big fatality wreck that happened last school year. Well, we're the drug testing company that tests that driver. And I was immediately called, why didn't you catch this? And I said, it's because it's DOT, and DOT doesn't test for that. I mean, we test DOT federally regulated tests, and that person is a driver. They implemented a total new change in their whole policy. They test every driver now for that because of that fatality. I mean, and you can make your policies that specific, but it's a constant chase. So I mean, and it's very scary. I've been testing at schools for many years, and that we've had some really good success stories, and we've had some that have been sad because there's some kids that OD, and that's the reason schools do some of this stuff. And what I commonly hear is, why don't you test everyone? Because it's not the kids doing extracurriculars that are doing drugs. Unfortunately, there are volunteer programs. If you want to test your kid, bring them in. We'll get you a cup and you can test your kid. But the schools don't have that privilege to do that, to help out for that reason. So, there's some tunes going on here.
Marching season.
All right. Any other questions that you guys can think of that you've been hit up with from students? Or?
Doug, I just like to say, like a lot of parents, I think most parents in our community, we really applaud Dr. Simpson and yourself and administration for doing this. I think this is a great thing. It's necessary, and it's going to help kids, and I appreciate you guys doing this and you being here tonight. But I think it's a wonderful thing you guys are doing for the kids.
I would have a question that on the counseling part of that. Who does the counseling? Is that a cost to the school? Is that a cost to the students, to the families?
Well, the counseling is provided by those two agencies. The school will pick up the cost if needed on that. And so what we're looking at right now is just providing that and making sure that it will not have to come out of their pocket. Any further questions? All right, appreciate you guys coming, and we'll be around if you have any other ones off camera.
Thank you.